little bit something Christmassy. We're doing Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, and kind of looking for biblical themes in that, but also just kind of looking at this thing as a whole, because there is a lot of our understanding of what Christmas is and what Christmas does, and all of that comes from this book. Like it's like this shaped modern kind of Christmas, and so it's kind of interesting seeing that. So just as the question was announced just a little bit ago, like what is your, like, well, what's your favorite movie, or what's your favorite rendition, and why? Or what's your favorite story surrounding A Christmas Carol? Like, that's just how we'll begin this. We'll kind of maybe get into some of the reading today. We're supposed to do chapter 1, but this is kind of the first week of it, so we'll kind of we're easing in. We'll go faster next week. But like, that's what's your favorite movie, rendition, play, and why was it your favorite? Like, that's over there.
Alistair Sims.
Alistair Sims?
Yep.
Yep.
He plays Scrooge.
All right, what year was that one?
I think that was like the 50s, the early 50s.
All right, that one. Okay. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
that would be just around the time where I would be like 4 to 6.
Okay.
You know, so that was the one that I saw. I've seen others, but
You've seen others, like, but that was the peak, right?
that's the peak. Yeah, that's the best one. I have it on tape, you know.
Oh, do you?
Watch it every year, cry all the time.
Oh, yeah. So is it your favorite because it was the one from your youth? Or what makes it your favorite?
I think it embodied it embodied the idea of the Christmas Carol and Christmas.
Yeah.
It was just give God a chance and see what he can do kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good deal. That movie was made about 100 years after it was written. So yeah, that's good. So what about someone else? Like, what's a favorite rendition of it? Last night I was, but yeah, go ahead, Mary.
I like the 1932 one with
Wow, I wasn't even.
Dean Lockhart. And when Scrooge comes in with all the presents, the wife goes, "Bob, the children," because they think that Ebenezer's going to like go berserk.
Oh, I think he's gonna like beat him and stuff.
And then I like the one that Lee said in 1951, because I think that was the one where they pan outside to all the souls.
Okay.
And like,
Oh yeah,
it's
yeah, I
like,
remember that.
yeah, super
I
scary.
That was something when I was reading the first chapter here that isn't presented in a lot of the movies.
Right.
Yeah. Like, that was something that I was like, oh, that's not in the movies.
Yeah.
Like that's
Where they're like ignoring, the poor people, and they're like shivering and everything.
yeah.
And that was pretty good. I'm a special effects nerd. That was pretty good special effects.
Yeah.
For that day.
For the time.
Yeah.
I like the older versions because they were so atmospheric.
Mhm.
I was chilled watching it. It was gray, bleak,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no color in this action here. It's just a very gray and bleak main character.
Yeah.
And for a little kid, that was.
I think one of those two versions also gets into more of the story of the servant and the undertaker, and they take Scrooge's belongings
Yeah.
and they pawn them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And they get into, and he says, "You took the bed curtains down with him laying there.
Yeah.
He doesn't need them anymore."
Yeah. Well, and that's like, yeah, there's funny things like that. We'll get into all that stuff too. There's kind of a biting humor in the book, and I think that's intentional, and I think it helps us along through the story too. The Anyone else's? Anyone else's? Like the one that I remember the most is a Muppets Christmas Carol.
I was gonna bring that up.
I was
Like, that's, and as we're gonna watch a video here in a little bit. I think it was that video. I watched so many A Christmas Carol like breakdowns and like all that stuff yesterday that they're all going together. And I think I remembered which one I thought was the best that we're gonna watch, but here in a little bit. But it's a lot of the experts like that, experts, they love that one the most. And the reason why is it's one of the few movies that actually hits the theme of the book. And it's because oftentimes and what their whole thing of the book is, the theme of the book is happiness no matter where you are. Like in the season brings happiness no matter what station or anything like that. And yeah, when the one scene from Muppets Christmas Carol that I remember, like I honestly quote this at least a couple times a week, is when Kermit the Frog kicked Bob Cratchit there, is it's getting yelled at by Scrooge. They all went more cold because it's cold, and they get yelled, and all the rats, when Scrooge yells at them, all break out into song and say, "This is my island in the sun." I think about that like at least once a week.
That is really so sad.
And so it's what
I've never
else?
seen that version.
You've never seen that version?
No.
Hey, like the people are, it's good.
It's very intelligent. I am a Muppets.
Oh yeah, Muppets are great. Jim Henson.
Like, now I'm going to probably lose everybody in terms of intelligence. Simpsons.
Yeah.
If you listen carefully, it's very, I mean, at one level it's,
Yeah.
but the folks who are writing this stuff, the Muppet people, as it were, very intelligent and
Mhm.
thoughtful, which is probably why it captured your imagination.
Yeah.
Because it's essential writing. Sort of, no.
Well, there's and we'll get into this when we get into the story, but like the rats yelling, "This is my island in the sun," is when Scrooge is yelling at him, is almost a callback to how Scrooge is feeling when he sees all the cheerful windows when he's walking home.
Mhm.
You know, he feels like it's all fake. And there's this sense, like as I was reading it, I was like, is it fake? You know, like that's and I kind of think like Jim Henson was next level in his stuff, and how he can make puppets relevant is wild. And but that's,
Had I known, I would have brought Grover, and it's.
oh yeah,
It works with the kids.
Yeah,
Taking
yeah.
pictures.
Oh, no.
Actually, it works with a few adults. Chris, this way, Chris.
I can see your out but there's all like, so does anyone else have a favorite, and that's and why? It could be one that we've already mentioned, because I think the why is the interesting thing.
Long before my experience with Christianity, that was lost. But yet, the redemption theme was the thing that grabbed me. And I could not get enough of his redemption. You know, being such a scoundrel, such a unhappy man. And the end is, just thinking about it now, it's, you know, it gave me hope even as a miserable kid.
Well, like that redemption theme is really interesting there, because I think Dickens does something with the character to make him where we don't just hate him, and that we hate the redemptive arc at the end. It's and I think it's humor. The funniest lines in our book are all Scrooge's. And we'll go through some of those as we get through there. Well, I have one right here on the front page. Let's see here. Like, so it's like the, I don't know, second or third paragraph. Mine, I don't mean to say that I know of my own knowledge what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest place of ironmongery, but in the trade. But the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, in my unhallowed hands shall not disturb it, or countries done before. You will therefore permit me to repeat emphatically that Marley was as dead as a door. Like it was just like that. That's funny. You know, the fact that he's thinking.
Oh, it's hilarious.
That's the narrator.
Yeah.
But it is Scrooge thinking that though. Like it's.
No,
Oh, okay, all right.
This is precisely, it's all narrative.
Yeah, okay, all right. But yeah,
Right. One thing that impressed me
yeah.
is I don't know what Chuck was thinking when he was writing. this.
Chuck. I went to boarding school.
Yeah.
But I swear he's watched your sermons on YouTube.
Oh, really? Why is that? Why is that?
Because Marley very, very capriciously has been dead for 7 years.
Oh, yeah, I underlined that.
Seven.
Like there's like when I was reading it, I was like, ooh, look at that. Let's
Okay, sermon
underline.
material.
Let's get that done. But and I think so a lot of the stuff that like when we bring it out, because we do that in this Bible study, we're like, oh, what's this stuff? I think what kind of used to sit more in the cultural zeitgeist, all these numbers and all these things. And I just think, you know, post-industrial revolution and stuff like that, I think as we just went further into modernism, like, oh, all that superstitious mumbo jumbo stuff is not worth it. We lost all that symbology of the numbers and all that stuff. But yeah, that's funny.
But then I also, you may think that I should be committed, but I have.
It's not something I think.
I have seen spirits.
Yeah.
I have seen spirits. I don't know whether anybody else has, but I have.
What just
Oh,
happened?
yeah.
I
So-
don't know.
I don't know.
What's going on, Lee?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Yeah, hold on, I'm coming back.
Oh, you're gone?
Not yet.
Oh.
Oh.
No, nobody wants me to come back, but I have seen others that, you know.
So how we view, like, because Ed brought up the spirits thing. What's
Mhm.
interesting about the Victorian era is we began to view spirits differently in the Victorian era, and partly that is because so we've always believed in like ghosts and things like that. But if you look at like in the Old Testament or even in the New Testament, I think there's some like ghostly mentions. It's always like kind of a full body person, you know, where Victorian era we kind of get this like ethereal, like doesn't have any legs and all that stuff. And it's funny where that came from because that's how Chuck mentioned it in his book too, kind of. Although Marley is pretty full form, but it's
You can see through him.
yeah, you can see through him, and that's very Victorian. So this is at the very beginning of photography, and one of the things I think one of the videos I'm going to show here a little bit, they would do spirit photos, and they did little like they would do photographic trickery, and that's kind of where all of a sudden people had these photos of like people without second half of their bodies down, because that's how they were able to do it. They're ethereal and kind of see through and all that stuff. It's funny how like culture things will bring this stuff in, whereas before we've always had ghosts. Like don't hear what I'm not saying, but it's just like the imagery changed with like Victorian England, and because of technology. And so like that's which is really kind of fascinating, and how it kind of, even to this day, it kind of with how we view ghosts and goblins and all that stuff on Halloween, that it's kind of, and I do think like the Victorian era is one of the most creepy. But yeah, like that's like so you're talking about seeing spirits and all that stuff. That's
Well, I had when we lived in Norristown, Pennsylvania, on Markley Street. It was a very old house, a row house. Well, it wasn't a row, it was a twin. But the people who bought the house when it was new in 1917 still lived there and sold the house to Barbara and I when they were going away, when the wife died. And so I would awaken at night and there would be someone standing over me, just standing, keeping, I guess, protecting me, watching, making sure that I wasn't hitting my wife or something. I don't know. But no, I mean, I've seen it.
yeah.
And I've also heard in the hallway in that same house, our deceased dog running up and down the hallway, and looked up the steps, and there she was.
Oh man, and that was a Victorian house too.
Yes.
Yeah. There's definitely a vibe going on. Like that.
Fireplace.
Yeah. Like that's
We found them both comforting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
that's interesting.
It wasn't frightening.
Mhm.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, because that's so. I mean, that definitely, and actually, I'm hoping the video shows all this that I'm thinking of. Like it's, but yeah, that trend right there was really big in Victorian England. A lot of mediums, a lot of like that's
Fairies.
yeah. All this is really big during that time. So there's also a bunch of movies and stories and all that stuff that follow this same outline. Like what can you think of any of those?
Yeah, there was one with Fonzie. I can't think
Henry
of.
Winkler.
Yeah, Henry Winkler. He did one. George C. Scott did one.
Yes.
Yeah. And were they Christmas movies, or were they just?
They were released around the holidays.
Yeah.
It wasn't a Christmas time. But
Okay.
the story was definitely a copy of Dickens, definitely.
Okay. Yeah. So like three spirits coming and kind of a redemptive arc.
Not necessarily spirits.
Yeah.
But like the one with Henry Winkler, just showed how kindness and love can take somebody totally lost and bring them to something wonderful.
Yeah. And so Mick said right when you started talking, you said this is
It's wonderful.
it's a wonderful life. It's a wonderful life.
Right, Kaplan.
And so like, and that's and how is that just because of the redemptive arc? So it's been a long time since I've seen It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh my.
Stay tuned, it'll be on.
So I've done
Couple more weeks.
I've watched it. It was I've done a couple sermons on it, but it's been about the production. You know why it's on the TV so much? Because the movie did not do well despite the cast, and the studio didn't re-up its copyright license, so they lost its copyright. So it was a halfway decent movie that every TV station in the country could play for free. Like that's why it became. Exactly. And so that's what happened there. So Wonderful Life. So what part of the story is like Dickens? Like if someone knows it better
Where
than me.
he's guided around and shown, No, well, this is, this could have happened to you. This did happen to
You've never
you.
been born.
And
Yeah.
if you,
Yeah,
and if you would have not have been born, all this would have transpired.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It showed how he acted as a true Christian, always doing for others, how it affected the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Mm.
Very
community.
selfless.
Yeah,
It's
even
nice
though
though
he
that
didn't know
it
it.
shows that he gets ticked off about it sometimes,
Yeah,
like human, you
Yes,
know?
because he's
Yeah,
human,
I'm
right?
doing these
Yeah.
things, but, you know,
Nobody
this burns
cares.
me up that I made these sacrifices, but then he goes ahead and he does it anyway.
yeah,
You know, even if he has, you know, a moment of peak and he gets, you know, aggravated.
yeah.
But he ended up smooching Mary, so what was that?
Donna Reed. He doesn't know who Donna Reed is.
I know the name.
You do? Oh, wow. Well, that's the end of that.
Donna Reed had a whole show.
That's right.
The Donna Reed show?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm here for you.
But the thing about A Wonderful Life is it's almost the reverse, and that George Bailey, he lives his life giving to others and helping others and pushing people ahead. And then he gets burned at the end and withdraws. And then they show him what he's done, and there's the redemptive arc. But unlike Scrooge, who screwed everybody for the first whatever number of years, and
Yeah.
then he gets redemption. But it's
Yeah,
the same sort of story about redemption, because all of a sudden he sees that he's done good. But,
And then everybody shows up to bail him out.
yeah.
yeah, that's interesting. And I think that's what's so fascinating about this story, because it's the first that's like that. You know, like this kind of, like, not the first, but I remember the first time I watched Blazing Saddles.
That's another Christmas.
Yeah,
movie.
that's a good Christmas movie.
I might as well leave
Oh,
this now. I'm done.
Way too much.
Like that's, and
That's
so,
sort of like this class.
so like that's it. I remember the first time I watched it, and I was kind of like, man, I've heard all these jokes before. And there's all these tropes, and I was like, man, all this stuff is just overplayed. And that's what it hit me. I was like, this is the thing that created all those tropes.
Yeah.
This is the thing that created all those jokes, all that stuff. And it's like, oh man, like
Could not
that's,
make that movie today.
yeah, like it's and I think this is very much like that. And which is funny, as we'll see in just a second, like in the video, is that Dickens had to write this. Like, this wasn't like a passion project. He wanted to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's, which I look back at the best papers I wrote in college and all that stuff, and were the ones that I was like, oh no, we gotta get this done tonight. I know, as a professor, that makes you happy.
It does.
Yeah, that's, this has gotta happen.
Time to put your pen down.
That's,
Yeah.
that's what this is. Makes me happy. And
One more redemptive movie,
yeah,
Galaxy Quest.
Galaxy Quest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Galaxy Quest, that's our favorite Christmas movie. It's not a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
We watch it at Christmas every year. It's the best Star Trek movie that.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Oh, wow.
Did you like Star Trek?
Star Trek, yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta watch
You need to
it.
watch Galaxy Quest.
Do you have a DVD player? I can bring you a copy. We have 3. And we ordered on Amazon.
Yeah.
No, but he starts out as a super selfish guy,
Yeah.
ends up helping
Mhm.
save a alien race,
Yeah.
and then everything's good at the end.
It's what it is. Imagine William Shatner in the 90s,
Mhm.
you know, and just going around to all of his doing fan service everywhere at all these like Star Trek conventions.
Mhm.
But all the Star Trek stuff ends up being real up in space. And this alien race needs someone to save them. And so they find the historical documents, which is old Star Trek stuff.
Uh-huh.
Well,
So they-
Galaxy Quest stuff, they were their own.
Yeah, it's Galaxy Quest. They can't use Star Trek.
Yeah.
Like so, but
But
it's
Tim Allen, Sigourney Weaver, Alan Rickman.
Really?
oh,
Yeah.
this movie's brilliant.
That's
Yeah.
a cast.
Yeah, if you
huge
like
fan.
Star Trek at all, you will love Galaxy Quest.
Yeah.
It does.
It's
It
hilarious.
does the source
and it's
material.
serious. I always tear up a little
Yeah,
bit at
yeah.
the end.
So that's,
It's a good movie. But it's that redemption.
yeah. So there was a, talking about doing it backwards, there was a movie that came out last year. Ryan Reynolds produced, I think with Netflix, called Spirited. And it was a take on this, but it was backwards. It was that this first story became like what they do. So like they got Ebenezer Scrooge, and that was successful. So the Spirited whatever, like they now go to all these people every Christmas to one person. They do a redemption thing on it, and then it all goes haywire and all that stuff. But funny movie. But and the guy who does all the choreography for it is Ryan Reynolds in it, and he's tired of it. He's like, this is just an old trope and all that stuff. It's a fun movie. It's watch that. And Coley will hate that I'm saying this. One of my favorite offshoots of Dickens, and none of you should watch it, but it's called The Night Before. It's a oh my gosh, a Seth Rogen movie.
No.
Like it's a Seth Rogen movie.
You're a man of great taste.
I am. And it's one of my favorite kind of modern takes of the Dickens thing. It has the three spirits, it has the whole thing, except it deals more with greed. It kind of deals with sadness. And so like that's, and like that goes into this, that I think the book is really dealing with sadness. And it's using the rich versus poor thing to really get into that, like where it's dealing with sadness and joy. You know, with it's.
I always thought it was dealing with loneliness.
Same
thing.
Yeah. And that's the same idea. So yeah.
I understand.
I think Scrooge is very lonely. He's locked himself away from everybody.
Yeah.
Excluded everybody from his life, and he has no
Absolutely.
connections, no friends, no contact,
Mhm.
and until the end. And then, so I don't think it's for me. It's not sad.
Mhm.
He's just lonely. He doesn't have anyone connecting with him. I don't think he thinks of himself as sad.
Or lonely.
Or
I don't think
he
Well,
may not think of himself as lonely either. You're right.
he's
he's
bitter
just
than
alienated everybody.
doesn't like anybody,
Mhm.
doesn't want to be with anybody.
Well, and I think when we get to Marley's chains, like he's got those same chains.
Yeah.
He just can't see them yet.
Well, the chain that's the vault, it's a chain around somebody.
Yeah.
Massive vault.
Yeah. So let's watch this video. It's a plucky little video here. It's like 9 minutes long.
You don't hear very often.
Yeah.
Plucky. If you get that on the internet,
Yeah. And so so
even you can't believe what you're saying.
and so it's like 9 minutes long. So we'll watch this.
In 1843, Charles Dickens was 31 years old and in serious financial trouble. He'd spent a great deal of money during his recent tour of America, and now, back in England, his wife Kate was pregnant with their 5th child. Though Dickens had already written successful books like Oliver Twist and The Old Curiosity Shop, the sales of his latest novel, Martin Chuzzlewit, were declining rapidly. His publishers had decreased his monthly pay, and he was forced to borrow money against his insurance policies. Dickens needed to write something that would sell, and he was to find his inspiration in an unlikely source. In the spring of 1843, Dickens read a parliamentary report on child labour. The document featured thousands of pages of oral testimony from child workers, some as young as 5, who worked grueling industrial jobs. Because Dickens had worked 10-hour days in a boot-blacking factory as a child, the plight of the exploited children resonated strongly with the author. Child labour had been one of the many negative results of the Industrial Revolution, which had transformed England and much of Europe and the United States during the 19th century. The introduction of the steam engines powered by coal allowed for factory machines to manufacture products in massive quantities, A class of industrialists, merchants and ship owners accumulated most of the wealth, while the working classes toiled long hours for little pay, working in small spaces with hot and dangerous machinery. As more and more people moved to the cities for work, urban areas grew populated and overcrowded. Wages were low and many families were forced to send their children to work in the factories and mines. In 1834, a poor law was introduced. The law stipulated that those unable to care for themselves could stay in workhouses. However, these dwellings usually contained substandard living conditions. Many people instead turned to crime out of necessity. Those who were caught were sent to prisons and often put to work in grueling ways. Victorian prisons featured the very first treadmills, which prisoners walked on to generate energy for grain mills or water pumps. "At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge," said the gentleman, taking up a pen, "it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at the present time." "Are there no prisons?" asked Scrooge. "Plenty of prisons," said the gentleman, laying down his pen again. "The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigour, then?" said Scrooge. In October 1843, Dickens took a long walk after attending a charity fundraising event in Manchester. It was there he conceived of the idea of A Christmas Carol, which he proceeded to write hastily over the 6 weeks that followed. A Christmas Carol drew heavily on the Gothic genre, which was highly popular in Victorian England. Gothic texts featured eerie and mysterious atmospheres, and often incorporated criminal, supernatural, or romantic elements. Other conventions of the genre included flawed protagonists, strange visions, omens, and nightmares. The settings of Gothic stories were also important, and often took place in atmospheric and isolated locations like castles and graveyards. Ghost stories were a particularly popular form of Gothic fiction, and were often filled with flickering candles, strange noises, shadowy houses, and malevolent spirits. These stories tapped into Victorian society's widespread fascination with the supernatural. Mediums were in great demand, holding seances where spirits were summoned, and furniture was seen to move or float. Spirit photography was also in vogue in the latter half of the 19th century and relied on photographic tricks to depict ghostly apparitions. Dickens also significantly chose to set his story during the Christmas season. The holiday had its roots in the pagan winter solstice festival known as Yule, an event filled with feasting, drinking, sacrifice, and increased supernatural activity. Dickens's story not only enhanced the association between Christmas time and the spiritual world, it would also help lay the foundation for the modern Christmas holiday. From the Middle Ages, Christmas grew to be celebrated on the 25th of December and associated with the birth of Christ. Festivals and church services were held annually in its honour. Yet by the 19th century, many of the holiday's traditions, like Christmas carols, had declined in popularity. For much of the population of England, Christmas was little more than a 2-day reprieve from grueling industrial life. The Christmas holiday began to undergo a gradual transformation following Queen Victoria's ascension to the throne in 1837. Her husband, Prince Albert, brought over the tradition of the Christmas tree from his native Germany in 1840. When an engraving was published in 1848 featuring the Queen, the Prince, and their children decorating their tree, the Christmas tree became immediately fashionable. 3 years later, Sir Henry Cole began selling the first Christmas cards in his art shop in London for 1 shilling each. Then, in 1847, a confectioner invented the first Christmas crackers. However, it was arguably the publication of A Christmas Carol on the 19th of December 1843 that had the greatest impact on the public's perception of Christmas time. The book was an immediate success and its first print run sold all 6,000 copies in less than a week. More than 15,000 had been sold by the year's end. The book touched its readers and helped imbue Christmas with the values of charity, family, generosity, and gratitude. Christmas carols saw a resurgence in popularity following their appearance in the book. To this day, A Christmas Carol remains a beloved seasonal favourite, both for its eerie narrative and humanitarian message.
All right. So I thought that was an interesting kind of setup for this of the story for us. We had assigned as homework the first stave. And we can see how much we get through today. I know the first time we do something new, we sometimes miss people and all that stuff in the announcement, especially when I'm not around on a Sunday. So it's what in this first stave, or anything we talked about before, what kind of stood out as things that were interesting, stuff that you really
I liked his nephew.
the nephew?
When he came in and Scrooge says, you know, "Well, you can't be so, why are you so happy? Because you're poor."
Yeah.
And he comes right back with, "Well, you're rich, you're no happier."
Yeah.
You know, you're not happy, so
Yeah,
that's a bad argument.
Yeah. I wrote during that whole thing, you know what reason do you have to be married? You're poor enough.
Yeah.
Like, and that's, like, it's like, that's, I wrote, like, that is the establishment of the point of the book.
Yeah. I think you're
Like, it's like establishing, like, what we're like, here's what is important. And that's, and it's good. That's also a funny line, you know, like that's a funny line. It's like, why are you so happy? You're poor enough, you know, like that's like, that's, and so, and I think that the humor is constantly being used so that we will actually like Scrooge in the end and want him to be redeemed. Like, it's that's kind of what I think is going on with the book there. That's good. But yeah, he kind of comes verging in. One of the things, and it's on my page before that, but it talks about the coldness of Scrooge.
Yeah.
Like, you know, external heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather chill him. You know, like no wind that blew was bitter than he, no failing snow was more intent on its purpose. Yeah, like that he's cold to the bone already. You know, like that's one of the videos I watched talked about, it was the British, what was it? Like, I can't, Reading Society or something like that video about it. And they talked about Scrooge's name is good because it kind of sounds like screw and like a stooge type of thing or something like that. Like that's, and it's like a mixing of two words, like together, which I thought was, and then the fact that his first name is Ebenezer, which is crown, you know, it's like you know, here I raise my Ebenezer, you know, like that. That's, what is that, crown him with many crowns? Is that what? Yeah. And so like that's English we don't use anymore, and that's hard to change that word. That's all. Like that's like Ebenezer. That's a lot of syllables.
And I hear people say, "What the is that?"
Yeah, what is an Ebenezer? Why am I rising?
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, so his name's like crown, like almost like king, you know, king like Scrooge. And so that's kind of that's an interesting little bite there too. Like what? All right, what else?
The title.
Yeah. What about it?
Well, it's not a Christmas story. It's a Christmas carol.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, and the original terms for carol was hold on, I got it here someplace. Dickens extends the concept of his book being a carol, a song celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ.
Okay.
And then each chapter is a stave instead of chapter, which is a
Oh,
stanza of a song.
that's interesting. Yeah,
Phone.
yeah, no, that is, so,
I thought it was parts of a barrel.
oh, parts of a barrel?
Well, that
Yeah.
is, but in context,
Yeah.
you're right, and she's right. One is musical and one is holding wine.
The holding one,
Yeah.
which could be argued as musical as well. And the yeah, so what else kind of stood out to you here?
Another line of the nephews that I highlighted that I liked was Scrooge is saying, you know, Christmas has done you no good. You have not ever profited from it. And he says, there are many things from which I might have derived good, but which I have not profited.
Oh,
Again, the
Yeah.
theme of the book.
yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
Like it's this whole happiness thing and like that going.
helping people doing good. but
Yeah,
You're not doing it for money.
yeah, exactly. That's and that's good. That's good. Let's see.
I like this one because the way that he parses the sentence, Scrooge is trying to get the nephew out of the office. And the
Yeah.
office is like, come on, man, what's the problem? And then the nephew says, I am sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel, to which I have been a party. So he's like,
Yeah,
whatever you're mad at me for, I don't know what this argument is.
Yeah. Well, and it's like and the nephew comes in with like with light and happiness.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, he comes in with light and happiness, and he doesn't take the bait with Scrooge. Yeah, like that's
Yeah,
I
he's
love how he
determined.
exits.
Yeah.
yeah,
Scrooge kept saying, good afternoon, get
Yeah.
out of here. And he just says, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
that's great. That's great. What else?
Well, I didn't until we watched that little video, I didn't understand about the treadmill thing.
Yeah.
It's in here, but I didn't, what, the treadmill and the Orla, I didn't understand what,
Yeah.
there's a lot of.
There's a lot. It's
Some
it's
terms that are,
living in that context.
Obsolete.
Yeah. Living in that context.
Treadmill you think of now is just a way of exercise for
right,
us, you know.
right.
They're
Or-
exploiting
or-
labor.
Or a way to check your heart.
Yeah. And they're exploiting labor.
Yeah,
Like that's what and how like we just have no memory of that. You have to rely on historians for stuff like that, because that's the kind of things you probably want to forget.
Yeah.
You know, like that's kind of the stuff that you want to forget. And let's see. What was again? There's just more kind of humorous like things that Scrooge says that let's see here. Okay, yeah. So he's like putting his key in the keyhole to go, and then all of a sudden a Christmas carol starts. But at the first sound of God bless you, merry gentlemen, may nothing you dismays, Scrooge seized the ruler with such energy of action that the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog, and that's funny. Like it's just it's a whole thing, which is an interesting move to make on Chuck, like to make them make think. Oh, and so Vance's point about loneliness, I wrote also the point here is that is this when the guys are asking for money, or is this still a nephew? I think it's when they're asking for money. Yeah, so when they're asking for money, and this is there's funniness about there. He's like, what shall I put you down for? Nothing. Scrooge replied,
Yeah.
"You wish to be anonymous?" Like, always be closing. Always be closing. Like that's like that was that's as soon as I read that, I was like, always be closing right there.
Yeah, used car salesman.
Yeah. Like that made me laugh. So, and he's like, "I wish to be left alone." Like that's like just leave me alone in that. And like I think you see that later in just the bleakness of his house too.
Mhm.
The bleakness of his house, and there's some interesting things going on there.
And the stressing of how cold the weather is too.
Yeah.
Great descriptions. Yeah, kind of miserable.
Yeah.
It's necessary as well that the house be immense and empty.
Yeah.
That's not merely, this is a cavernous emptiness that is existing in shit. He's diminished, as it were.
Yeah, and I like how you said the cavernous emptiness, like, and there's so much brilliance in that he has so much that the rooms are able to be so big
And it's still empty.
that there's the walls are too far away to get any of the light from his camera. So it's just darkness. And I'm like, whoa, what an image. Like that, like, that's what you're talking about. Like that's I was like, man, what an image there.
And again, this is a memory of a kid. I'm watching, and that's really scary.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was big as a kid, but this is devastating.
Well, the first version of it I remember is actually Vincent Price's Scrooge.
Right.
It was a very dark movie.
Yeah. Oh, it's and darkness is definitely what's needed there.
Which diminished for me when as time goes on, you have color versions.
Yeah.
It was not sufficiently bleak.
Are you saying the Muppets one wasn't sufficiently bleak? Let me break it a song.
There are other lines in here, though. It says at one point that which no, let's see if I got to go the right place. This is hard and sharp as a flint from which no steel had ever struck a generous fire, secret and self-contained, as solitary as a oyster. Which I never thought of that term, but
Yeah.
and then later on he says that he writes that even the blind man's dogs.
Oh, yeah, I like that
When
one.
they
That's
saw it
great.
coming, they would tug their owners into doorways and up ports.
Yeah.
Even the dogs know. like that's yeah. And you say reading that part again, like there's a brilliance to the Muppet one. They like that's all presented in the first musical number. There goes Mr. Humbug. There goes Mr. Grimm. Like that's I mean you guys are all gonna watch it now.
Yes.
It's gonna make me happy. It's but I should. I should. It's when he's talking to those. The one thing I want to point out too is when he was talking to what is the guys raising money still, and he goes, "Many can't go there. Many would rather die," is what he says to Scrooge. And then, if they would rather die, said Scrooge, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population.
Back to haunted later.
Yeah. Well, and I wrote Tim on the side of that. Like that's and that's just it's just great writing that like you just like you stare at Tim later on, and that's and the dying surplus population is what ends up turning him around, like, which is cool. That's it also kind of hit me. I've been slowly watching the Marvel movies, like since the summer, like making the way with her. And I watched on Tuesday night. I made it to Infinity War, which is the one with Thanos, and Thanos's goal is he wants to get rid of the surplus population. If you haven't seen that movie, it's too bad. It's too bad. None of you have seen that.
But again, the writing, like setting that scene of the house out on its own, it says, so it's talking about where the house is. And where it had so little business to be that one could scarcely help fancying it must have run there when it was a young house, playing hide and seek with other houses and forgotten the way out.
Oh, what an image.
Isn't that
What, yeah, what an image of that. And like, it's such good image, you know, because we talk about bleakness and loneliness and sadness, and that's and what sadness to be forgotten about in hide and seek, you know,
Yeah.
like that.
No one
That's,
came to look for it.
you know, no one came and looked for you. Like that's
And what had been a vibrant house, probably with tenants and everything, is now empty except for some offices and Scrooge.
Yes.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. The one thing I never really picked up before when the clerk leaves his office, which is, it sounds like it's just a depressing place to work, but it describes what he does as soon as he gets out. Like, so the clerk promised that he would, you know, he'd be back early on after Christmas. Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no greatcoat, went down a slide on Cornhill. At the end of the lane of boys 20 times in honor of it being Christmas Eve. So he gets out of this really grim workplace, and the first thing he goes and plays with a bunch of boys. You know, what a, like, interesting image.
Yeah.
Like that's like that he's even in the bleakness. Even in the bleakness, he's okay.
He's an innocent child.
Yeah.
His world is still filled with wonder and joy of sliding down an ice-filled street.
Yeah.
You know, in spite of his circumstances, in spite of his poverty, he still sees joy in life.
Yes. And I thought that was,
Well, and he, unlike Scrooge, has got human connection, which is his savior, his inspiration.
Yeah.
It's the human contact, in this case of him and his wife and daughters, etc. Whereas, again, Scrooge has effectively removed all connection.
Yeah. And so he's just alone, and that's when you get to that knocker,
Yeah.
and it looks like
Marley's face.
like looks at it there all of a sudden. Yeah, that's and it's just it's empty, and so we get into what we were talking about earlier. Like, he walks into the place, and peals of echoes in its own when he goes in. Let's see. How does it put it here? So he looks on the other side of the door, except for the screws and nuts held the knocker. So he said, "Poo poo," and closed it with a bang, and that bang echoes throughout the empty house. Yeah, there's nothing to stop the emptiness.
Even to the cellar.
Even to the cellar. Yeah, like good. So much room, but absolutely no one is around. Let's see. Go ahead.
And then later they talk about when he goes to bed, he looks under the bed, he looks everywhere. The back of the door.
Yeah, he's looking everywhere, which kind of says that he's a little uneasy. Uneasy. I wrote odd for that. He so he quite satisfied. He closed the door and locked himself in, double locked himself, you know, which was not his custom. Like that's and that kind of brings about this kind of like he's a little freaked out already. And then the one thing I really thought was his hearth, was his fireplace in his bedroom, and the Dutch merchant stuff. Yeah, so I'll read that. So the fireplace was an old one built by some Dutch merchant long ago, and paved all around with quaint Dutch tiles designed to illustrate the scriptures. There were Cain's, Abel's, Pharaoh's, Queens of Sheba, yada, yada, yada. And you know, the apostles, and yet that face of Marley, 7 years dead, there's that 7 years right there. 7 years came like an ancient prophet's rod, swallowed up the whole. If each smooth tile had been blank at first, power to shape some picture on its surface from a disjointing fragments, as their thoughts would have been a copy of old Marley's head on every one. And like that's, and what I think is interesting there is that you have the little bit of heat coming into his house. He was surrounded by the scriptures there, and yet he wants nothing to do with any of that. You know, like he's still pushing it aside. Humbug. That's yeah. So that's really good. That's really good. We should probably end there. Because we go into Marley right now. Marley. And what are you laughing at?
She's laughing at me,
Oh.
so I'm laughing back.
Anything you'd like to share with the class?
Yeah.
You passing notes?
Not right now.
Not right now.
We already did that.
So it's, I don't know how fast we're gonna get through this. We started moving pretty quick there. So maybe 2 or 3 more staves, 2 or 3 more chapters kind of get through as we go through there. We'll kind of talk about, we're at that hearth, in the beginning of Marley, and I really, the imagery of Marley's chain surprised me. Like that's I have not seen a movie that does what this does with that.
I've seen movies where they put a lot of padlocks on it, which I never understood, but I never the money chests and
All the stuff.
Ledgers,
Yeah. Like that, I was like,
all
oh,
the things that are important to Ebenezer,
yeah. And his
to the king.
to the king Scrooge.
I love the bell.
Yeah. So remember the bell next week. And so we'll kind of go through here. Oh, we might blast through this thing. We might, we can go at whatever speed we need to. And that's, but it's, we get the 7s. It was, like that. Yeah, it's just, it gets into some good imagery that's very biblical going into here. So so everyone that's watching on YouTube, thanks for joining us today. All right. So